Thank you for listening to the Chronicles of Christendom, a survey of medieval literature, by me, Mom Chilo. This podcast is dedicated to bringing light to medieval stories and viewing them from a traditional Christian perspective. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone, hope you're doing well today. We're going over the Mabinogi again, specifically the third branch, which picks right up from the second branch. So you really need to listen to the last two episodes in order to have enough context to enjoy this one. So if you remember from the last episode, what we learned was that there was a huge battle or huge war really between Ireland and the Island of the Mighty, or Great Britain, specifically Wales. But Wales is kind of equated with the entirety of Britain, or at least it's implied that the High King of Britain resides in Wales, and that his principal territory that he actually rules over, not just nominally, is in Wales. So there was the war, and then in Ireland, all that was left was a couple of people who are left to repopulate the island. And then on the other side, we see the death of Bran, the High King. He is stabbed in the foot with a poisoned spear, which, as I said, seems to be some sort of castration euphemism. And then he orders that his head be chopped off. And then the survivors bury his head in London. And then that's where the third branch picks right back up with. And the first thing that we see in this episode is that Manawydan, who is Bran's brother, he's staring off into the distance and he says, "Alas, God Almighty, woe is me," said he. "There is no one without a place of their own tonight except me." "Lord," said Pryderi, "don't be so unhappy about that. Your cousin is king of the island of the mighty, and although he may do you wrong," he continued, "you have never been a claimant for land or territory. You are the third humble chieftain." "Aye," he said, "though that man is my cousin, I find it somewhat sad to see anyone in the place of Bran, my brother, and I cannot be happy in the same house as him." "Then will you pursue another counsel?" asked Pryderi. "I have been needing counsel," said he. And then Pryderi offers to marry Manawydan to his mother, Rhiannon, who we learned about, really about in the first branch is when we learned the most about her. And she was the wife of Pwyll. However, Pwyll dies at the end of the first branch, so she's now single. And the idea is that I think that she's not necessarily an older woman at this point. It's more so that she doesn't really age because she is from the other world. And then Pryderi also says that he will give them certain lands of his that they can rule over. We also here see this sort of union of Wales as well. So not only is there the union between the Wales and the other world with marrying of Rhiannon and Manawydan, but there's also a union between the north and the south if this occurs, because Manawydan he seems to be characterized or sort of have his origins in the north of Wales, over where like Bran was and like Harlech. But then Pryderi in Dyfed, he is like the lord of southern Wales. So he agrees and they go back to Dyfed, and then when he meets Rhiannon, him and Rhiannon just kind of hit it off naturally, and then they get married. And then we learn, or we're told rather, that a bond of friendship is established between Rhiannon Manawydan, that couple, and then Pryderi and his wife, Kigva. The four of them then go to the mound where Pwyll first saw Rhiannon. And then if you remember, one of the details we learn about this mound is that if a noble person goes onto it, they will either suffer a fatal blow or they'll witness a miracle. And then here's what the story tells us. "As they were seated thus, suddenly there was a clap of thunder, and, with such a great clap of thunder, a fall of mist, so that no one could ever see anyone else. After the mist, everywhere was filled with bright light, and when they looked where before they could have once seen flocks and herds and dwellings, they could see nothing at all, neither house, nor animal, nor smoke, nor fire, nor man, nor dwellings, nothing except the empty buildings of the court, deserted, uninhabited, without man or beast within them, their own companions lost, without them knowing anything about them, no one left except the four of them." So a mist is placed over the land, and it's not over all of Wales. It seems to be just over the specific lands that Pryderi rules over in southwest Wales. And then we have to sort of figure out what is this mist imagery. So mist represents, in some cases, like the other world, or some influence from the other world as well. It also has a lot to do with like magic. So I think what the implication here is that the other world has put an enchantment onto Southwest Wales, and no one is left there except the four of them, and no buildings are left either except like their court hall that they have. So they're forced to live off the land hunting for a year, but then they don't really find it tolerable, so they head over to England, where they take up saddle making. But then they get run out of town by their competitors because they made the saddles so well that people were only going to them to make saddles unless they were too busy. And then the other saddle makers conspire to try to kill them. And then Pryderi suggests that they kill them first. But then Manawydan says that they should just move to another town. And this is the general pattern that happens a few times, where they engage in a craft, they get really good at the craft, so much that people only come to them, and then the people who they're putting out of business then conspire to kill them. Pryderi says that they should kill them, and then Manawydan says, no, let's just leave. So this happens a couple times. So there's the first with saddle making, and then another time this happens with shields, and then shoes. And after they get kicked out of the third town where they were shoemakers or cobblers, they decide to head back again to Dyfed. And then so they're forced to live off the land there. And then one day, while Manawydan and Pryderi are hunting together, they spot this shining white boar that they begin to chase down. And if you remember, when you see animals associated or having these weird colors about them, like in the very first scene of the first branch of the Mabinogi, where Pwyll encounters these dogs with this like vibrant red color on them. So this boar has some otherworldly connections, and we'll see here in a second. So they're chasing down this boar, and then it leads them to this newly built fortress. And if you remember, the enchantment that was placed on the land destroyed all of the dwellings. So the fact that there is a fortress here, especially a newly built fortress, as we're specifically told, is interesting. So the boar goes into the fortress, and then their hunting dogs follow the boar into the fortress, and then they wait, but no one ever comes out. None of the dogs or none of the animals ever come out. And then after a little while, Pryderi says, "Lord," speaking to Manawydan, "I am going into that fortress to find out about those dogs." "God knows," said Manawydan, "your counsel to go into the fortress is not good. We did not see this fortress here ever before. If you would follow my counsel, you would not go in. Whoever put enchantment on this land has also made this fortress appear here." So again, we see Pryderi being a bit rash compared to Manawydan. So Pryderi, when they were in those various cities in England, picking up trades or engaging in those trades, he always wanted to fight against and kill the people who were trying to run them out of town. And Manawydan always says that, no, let's not do that. So again, we see Pryderi being a bit rash in his actions. So he says that he's not going to give up his dogs. And then whatever else Manawydan would say, Pryderi nonetheless made for the fortress. When he got to the fortress, he could not see man, nor beast, nor the boar, nor the dogs, nor house, nor dwelling inside the fortress. All he could see approximately in the middle of the courtyard was a fountain with marble stonework around it. Beside the fountain was a golden bowl, attached by 4 chains, which was above the marble slab, with the chains reaching up into the air, and he could not see the end of them. He was inspired at the beauty of the gold and at how good the workmanship of the bowl was. He came up to where the bowl was and laid hold of it. And as soon as he laid hold of the bowl, his hand stuck to the bowl, and his 2 feet to the slab on which he was standing. The power of speech was taken from him, so he could not utter a single word, and thus he stood unable to move. So in Pryderi's rashness, he gets stuck to this bowl inside the fortress, and he's unable to speak. So meanwhile, Manawydan is waiting, but he eventually leaves once the sun starts setting, and then he goes back to where the ladies are, and then he tells them what had happened. And then Rhiannon goes to the fort, and then she sees Pryderi there, and she also grabs the bowl. And then when night comes, there's again a clap of thunder and mist, and the fort disappears, along with Pryderi and Rhiannon. So all that's left is Manawydan and Kikfa, and they decide that they want to head back to England to again engage in trade. So they become shoemakers, and then the pattern repeats again where they become so good, and then they're run out of town by their competitors who are losing all of their business to them. And then they go all the way back to Dyfed where they begin planting wheat. And we're specifically told that this is the finest wheat. And then once one of the fields is ready to be harvested, Manawydan says that the next day he's going to go out first thing in the morning and harvest the wheat. However, when he wakes up, he finds that all the wheat is gone. And then, when the next patch is ready, he says, okay, tomorrow I'm going to wake up early and then harvest the wheat. And then he goes to sleep, and then he finds in the morning that the wheat is yet again all gone. But when it's time to harvest the third patch, he waits and camps out at the field with weapons to see what's going on. And then this seems to be a similar thing to what happens with Tiernan with the mare. You remember he has this prize mare, and this is in the first branch, by the way. So he has this prize mare, and then once a year it gives birth. But then the night after it gives birth, the mare, or rather the foal, its child, disappears somehow. And then one year he decides he's had enough, and he camps out with weapons by the mare and the foal to see what goes on. And then he realizes that at night there's this claw that comes and takes the baby foal away. But then this time, since he has his weapons, he's able to slice the claw that breaks through the barn, and then the foal drops from the claw. And the idea seems to be that you need, or if you have a bad relationship with the other world, then you will have certain fertility issues. So there's the issue with the mare and the foal, but then there's also the issue here with the wheat. So it's not just fertility on like a human level, but rather it's like the fertility of the land itself, which can be jeopardized with this improper relationship to the other world. So like Tiernan, Manawydan is also camping out with weapons to find out what this fertility issue is all about. So while he's camping out, he sees that this horde of mice come on the field in the middle of the night, and they eat up all of the crop. And then he's able to grab one of the fatter mouses because it's slow, and then he puts it into a glove, which he then basically says he wants to hang the mouse for its crime of thievery. And then when he goes back to their little encampment or whatever, and he talks to Kikfa, he tries to explain, what's happened and what he has in his glove and how he's found the thief that was stealing from his crop. And then Kikfa says, or she tries to explain it to him, that it would be dishonorable for him to hang the mouse. But then, he insists. He says, no, I'm going to hang him. And then she's just kind of like, okay, whatever, you do you. And we'll see this come up a few other times. So he then heads to the mound again where Ranwan was spotted. And you remember, when you go there and you're a person of nobility, like all these people are, you'll either witness a miracle or you'll suffer a fatal blow. So he goes to that mound, and then he tries to hang the mouse. And then for the first time in 7 years, he sees another man in Wales, or at least in that part of Wales. And I guess this is supposed to be the miracle. And then he sees this, specifically, he sees this scholar who's in these shabby clothes. And he learns from him that he comes from England, but he's heading back to his own country. But this actually raises a couple of other questions. So they're in southwest Wales. If he's coming from England and he's going back to his own country, what is he doing in southwest Wales? He can't be heading for Ireland because at this time in Ireland, there's only 5 pregnant women on the entire island. So the implication, I believe, is that this man is some sort of otherworldly figure, as you might have presupposed. But regardless, the man says that he'll give Manawydan £1 for him not to kill the rat. And his reasoning for this is that he does not want to see a man of his stature, of his sort of rank, degrade himself with such an act of killing the mouse. But Manawydan refuses, and the man goes along his way. And then while he's, further setting up the, stuff that he needs to kill the mouse, another person comes up on him. This time it's a priest. And the priest comes and offers him £3. And again, for similar reasons, is that he does not want to see a man of his stature, of his rank, degrade himself. But he also refuses, and then the priest goes along his way. And then as he's about to kill the mouse and he has the noose around its neck, a bishop and his entourage come walking by. So Manawydan asks for the bishop's blessing, And then the bishop offers him £7 to not kill the mouse. And then he offers him £24. And then he offers him all the horses and pack animals that he has with him. And each time Manawydan refuses. And then the bishop finally says, "Since you do not want that, name your price." And then Manawydan responds, he says, "I will name it," he replied, "the freeing of Rhiannon and Pryderi. You will get that. I don't want it between me and God." "What do you want?" the bishop says. "Deliverance from the magic and enchantment upon the 7 cantrefs of Dyfed. That you will also have if you release the mouse." "I will not free it between me and God," said Manawydan. "I want to know who the mouse is. She is my wife, and were that not so, we would not be freeing her." So then we learn a couple of other things from this man. We learn, for instance, that he is friends with the original suitor of Rhiannon, so the man that Rhiannon was supposed to marry, and instead married Poil. And he comes to seek revenge for the badger in the bag incident, which I talked about in the first branch, in the first episode of this series. So the badger in the bag incident was when they put the suitor, or the would-be suitor, in this like magical bag, and then everyone just started like kicking him in the bag. And then we also learned that the mice that come and eat up the crop in the field are his warband, who he turned into mice through some sort of magic. And that the fat mouse that Manawydan captured is his pregnant wife. And that's why she was fat and slow and she was able to be captured. But eventually he agrees to exchange Pryderi, Rhiannon, and lift the enchantment on the land for his wife back. But Manawydan says he'll only do this if he also promises that there will be no more revenge, and then they agree. And then immediately he sees Rhiannon and Pryderi come back, and then the bishop hits the mouse with his magic wand, and she turns into a beautiful lady. And then the land returns with all the buildings and all the people as it was before. So we see that some of the problems that came about in the first branch with the badger in the bag incident and how it kind of caused this cycle of revenge, which eventually plagued the entire land of Dyfed, has now been resolved through Manawydan. The relationship between the otherworld and Wales is now restored. But the way that the land is restored is not from someone from the land, or at least not someone from southwest Wales, but rather someone from outside who comes and saves the land. So that's pretty much everything that I had for today. I know this is rather shorter. However, next week we'll go over the 4th branch of the Mabinogi. As well, we'll talk about all 4 branches as a whole and some underlying themes. So that's all for now. Thank you so much.